the general event community. And one of the topics that came up is about partnerships, which can involve mergers and acquisitions, or it could be just working together. And it's clear, given the current climate, this could be one of the ways that agencies should be looking at, and hence this session. I'm going to be recording the session just so we can put it on the Agency Leaders Forum, just so you know. And if you do have questions throughout, then pop them in the chat box, and Richard and Andy would basically bring you in to answer them. It's a nice niche group, so I think it's going to be fairly free-flowing. Two speakers today, got Richard and Andy, and I'm going to hand over to both of them now to introduce themselves and then take the session on. Richard, over to you.
Thanks very much, Chet, and hello and welcome everybody. So as Chet said, a number of times on this leadership group, there has been discussion about M&A and what's happening in that marketplace. Is it the time for M&A? Is it not? So Chet and I were chatting, and he asked me if I would be kind enough to sort of chair a discussion around that. And instead of involving anybody from a specific company, I thought I'd work with Andy on this, who I know a number of you do know, who I met through a friend of a friend a few years ago, who now is specializing in supporting and advising companies in this marketplace. And doesn't go without saying, it's a very strange marketplace. Yeah, the sector was good. We were going great guns. It was all about live is the new advertising, and all of a sudden the whole world has dropped off the shelf. Business has been hit by a tsunami, decimated, diabolical, dead, who knows. Won't return anytime soon. I can share with you with my EMA hat on. So talking to the corporates, that really very, very little is planned until next year, and they're still now just starting to get their heads around it all and working out what they're doing. So I think up to 50-60% of businesses in our sector, lots of small independent businesses, could fail. So where is the light at the end of the tunnel? Slow return 21, 22. It's going to be tough. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. So is it now the time to start be thinking of merging, acquiring, or even just partnering? Surely M&A is very different to what it was 12 months ago. How do you value a business? What do you put on that? So I'm gonna have a chat with Andy. I've got sort of a bit of a narrative that I've scribbled down here, a few questions, but very much happy to lead in with questions. If you've got someone's pressing, raise a hand and I'll bring somebody in. But, we're going to go through a sort of a flow and then also open it up for sort of a roundtable discussion afterwards. So, Andy, do you want to kick off by introducing yourself, sir, and how you got into this? Because you had your own media agency or something before, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. Okay, let's switch this on. Am I on? That's right. So my company is called Capital A, and we're an M&A business, and we only deal with creative agencies. So the majority of our clients are on the buy side. Some of them are actually on this conversation now. And we help them basically to find agencies to speak to about acquisitions. And also we work on the sell side as well. So some of our clients are actually looking to sell their agencies, and what we do is we bring as many buyers as we can to the table to give them some options and help them through that process as well. So my background is I started out actually in sort of video and newspapers in the 90s, and I founded a digital business in early 2000s, and I grew that over a 14-year period. And we exited that in 2016, and since then I've been helping other business owners who work in a similar background, sort of events agencies and digital and publishing and media related businesses, and I help them. The idea really was that actually when I went through the process of exiting the business, that it was much more complicated and expensive process than it needed to be. There was a lot of jargon used, for instance, and also, you have sort of accountants and lawyers working to make the whole process much more complicated. And my hope is that I can bring a bit of everyday sort of language to the process and help other creatives who maybe feel that they can't access these types of services to acquire businesses because for those reasons, it's too complicated and it's too expensive. So yeah, that's really my background and my objective. And yeah, as I said, there's a number of my clients on the call today. Basically, I'm helping these guys to find businesses. So I have a couple of very experienced, actually, investment bankers and sort of family office type people that work with me, and they help me to sort of fill out all of the financial side of things. So yeah, so I know you yourself, Richard, you went through a similar process as well and exited a business. So again, you've got some experience as well.
Yeah, I've been there, seen it, got the T-shirt. Absolutely agree with you. It sounds crazy, but I probably went into it with a little bit with my eyes shut apart. So I think I did quite nicely and okay. But could I have done better? I don't know, and anyway, who knows? But I have to say, I'm pretty pleased that I'm not in there owning the business now, and that the money's in the bank or elsewhere. Mind you, it's not doing that much anywhere else. But yeah, at least I got some cash off the table, which thank God for that. Anyway, there we go. So yeah, I mean, give me an overview, Andy, of like what you feel, what's available out there, why buy, why build, why not build, why not sort of hunker down and keep your powder dry, what would make with a good acquisition now, or a good partnership, good collaboration, sorry. How do we get this to come together?
Yeah. I think particularly in events, I think there's a much bigger opportunity for all creative agencies anyway, but I think particularly with events businesses, because of the whole lockdown scenario, they've had to do this sort of pivot to work with their clients on hybrid events and virtual events. And because of that, what they've realized is actually they're offering a much more digital based service. And it's not that they didn't have these skills before, because obviously they're able to switch these events on and really turn off the face-to-face element of that and provide things like broadcasting in real time from an event, or also maybe they were doing some kind of digital measurement of some sort. So they already had very good digital skills, but because they've had to switch off the live part of this, they've realized that actually there's some holes in their skill set when it comes to digital. So I think that's one big opportunity, because now the sort of the gaps, if you like, in the skill set have been identified. Then these events companies can actually focus more on that and build out a much broader range of services for their clients going forward, and also just something that's much more robust. I think one thing that comes up quite a lot with my clients is that nobody's sure what's going to happen next with COVID, whether there's going to be another peak or not. So actually building out this skill set is one of the things that they've had to look at. The other thing is, of course, because of the whole COVID thing, events industry has been hit one of the hardest, and that means there are some businesses, and we've already seen that with some businesses that we've discussed, Richard, that have experienced trouble and have either closed down themselves, or they have gone into administration, or they're about to. And so because of that, obviously business owners, agency owners in the event space are realizing that there are going to be some big opportunities coming up in terms of acquiring assets, and whether those assets are people or contracts that are going to become available in clients and things like that. So that's the first two things I think is probably what we can focus on, is just that there's a big digital opportunity for the events industry, and also there's like a talent and client opportunity as well that's that's going to come onto the market over the next few months as some businesses close down.
Yeah, and I totally agree, especially on the digital side. In many ways, the market was caught with its pants down, with very little knowledge and experience within the digital world of taking things streaming, online, everything else. Yes, there are companies out there that have been doing this, or doing it in a certain case, but to be able to go to it to the extent we are now, and again, talking with my EMA members, for the next 12, 18 months, everybody sees digital leading the experiential, the events sector, and events be live, face-to-face, being reintroduced when and how they can. But that digital, with the integrations of the hybrid model, is definitely long-term the model of the future, because people can see that they can use it, they can work with it, they don't need to be at everything, don't want to be at everything. So, there's definitely that sort of digital comms side going to be far stronger and more important going forward.
I think that's another part of the realization as well, really, is actually, and I'm speaking to a lot of different types of events companies, but they're realizing that what they were experts at already was engagement and communication. And actually their clients are still looking for these things in this post-COVID world. So how can we focus on that, and how can we use the resources and skill sets that we've already got, but augment it with a more broader digital skill set as well. Obviously, one of the difficult things is that actually digital businesses are really thriving during this period as well. So in terms of finding this extra talent, that could be the challenge of it. But I think if you've got, like you say, the dry powder, I think that's where the big opportunity is actually to go out and find really great digital businesses that you can bolt to a business fairly effectively, in terms of how that can cost much less if you go for a smaller digital agency and bolt that on and then build out a skill set.
Well, perhaps that comes to a point about the health of your business. Because again, there's different sizes of agencies. Agencies that are, 2 or 3, 4 or 5 people. There's 20, 30, which is, I think, a sort of good majority size of a nice sort of medium-sized agencies. Then you're up to the big ones, that sort of 50 plus. I would say up, to 300, 400 people. But the healthy, does a business need to be healthy now in this market? Especially if, is it a merger? Is it an acquisition? When do I go to the market? When I'm thinking about this, how do I approach it?
Again, there's two sides to this conversation. Obviously, I think if you're part of the dry powder conversation and you have good cash reserves in the bank and a fairly robust business, maybe you have been able to furlough the majority of your staff and actually just focus on digital and virtual events. If you're one of those types of businesses, then like I say, I think there's a much bigger opportunity to build a 360-degree agency, something that is more focused on comms right across the board, and build out a skill set. So there's definitely that if you have the dry powder. But I think perhaps the other side of that conversation that we haven't discussed yet is if you find yourself in some kind of trouble, or you don't see too much, like you said, there's a cliff edge for the events industry, and when people have used up those 2, 3, 4 months of reserves of cash, what is the opportunity for those types of companies? And I think there's a really big opportunity for these businesses, actually, particularly if they have things like, lots of awards and they've got the creative talent that they're known for, that they can look for roll-up opportunities. So other businesses that are in the same boat as them, and they can save money with the back office, and pool resources, and share some of the back office type things. And also what that does is preserves the value of their companies. So when you're valuing companies, obviously this is a much bigger conversation that I'm constantly having, actually.
I was going to say, let's jump to valuation a bit later on, because everyone knows that. How do I value this? But I get where you're coming from. That you could be in difficulty as a business, but there is still an
Sorry, I missed that, Richard. You cut out.
Yeah, value in a business is, even though because the market's dry and it's got overheads, but there's still intrinsic value there because you have really good relationships. You've been doing it, so you've got proof of concept. You've got a client base. It's more about cash flow and time, and so that's where the concept of your roll up comes, and that would lead me to the question of, which I would quite like, is it becomes a picking time for the vultures in the marketplace. We all hate them, and because again it comes down to culture. To me, there's people who think they're white knights, or there's knights, there's vultures, and then there's real people. People that we can work together, we can make this happen. I see the benefit of this. How do you pick and choose who you talk to, or how you approach these conversations? Because culture, isn't it? To make it work after doing something is all got to be about culture and agreed values and personalities. Yeah.
Actually, Steve, who's on the call, we talk about this quite a lot. It's the whole process of kissing as many frogs as possible.
We've all done that.
To find your prince. So I think really that's what it's going to boil down to, because like you say, it's all about culture actually. And the most important thing that we ever discuss with agencies that we're approaching, in particular, when we're approaching agencies to acquire, obviously it has to be very sensitive, these conversations. But one of the big things that we really focus on is what their culture is, and what the culture of the type of business that they would like to go into is as well, so that we can discuss all of that up front before we even introduce them to our clients. Because I think, one of the big things that comes up is that some agency owners are just unacquirable, because they are, everybody here probably would sort of put their hand up if you're a rebel, would describe themselves as rebels or iconoclasts or whatever. You kind of have to be a little bit to start an agency in the first place. But some of these agency owners are just unmanageable, and the big thing really is, can they go into another business and be managed as part of a bigger group? And that's one thing that we have to discover for our clients. But yeah, that's the main thing is, and if you're going to go into a roll up, can you find several other businesses that you've probably already worked with that have a similar culture and a similar sort of viewpoint on what the the big objective should be. And what I was just about to say about the valuation thing is, these smaller businesses, actually, if you're under 5 million turnover, it's very difficult to get a good valuation for your business. But if there's 4 or 5 of you together, and you can exist post-COVID together with a good business plan and share clients and resources, and you can do something like 15 or 20 million turnover, actually the exit for those businesses in 3 years is going to be much better. Exactly, where they can look at things like a 10 times, 11 times valuation. So there is a great opportunity for businesses that maybe they don't feel like they can acquire other companies at the moment, but they could certainly look at other businesses with similar cultures.
So the roll-up merger is like-minded people coming together, sharing their ethics and their principles, and say, look, this is where we see the opportunity. This is my passion. Together we're stronger than on our own.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm getting quite a lot of agency owners that I've been speaking to for a long time that have been the rowdy rebel in the past, that have been humbled by what's happened, and actually have approached us again and said, look, we would be willing to go into a roll-up if you can find other companies with a similar sort of viewpoint as us, then let's start discussing what those opportunities will look like. And I think I'm going to be having that conversation a lot more over the next, the next 6 months, the second half of this year, when we see the end of furlough, and how many people are really going to be laid off, and how robust these businesses are in 3 months' time, after September, October time. I think we're going to have this conversation a lot more, because the proof will be in the pudding at that point, which events businesses are really going to exist after that. So yeah, the big opportunity really is for those businesses that might be in trouble, is this roll-up concept, and whether they can start one themselves or whether they can join one that's already happening.
Yeah, and then they would start to get around. Well, I do 3 million and you do 1 million. So how do we then work out?
Yeah, well, there's all of that to work out.
We all do nothing now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you would hope some of them have pivoted to digital. And the other thing that you were talking about, that we started about the Kiss and the Frogs and the whole White Knight vulture type thing. I mean, I do come across the occasional vulture, but what I will say is the majority of people that I speak to are good people, and they have good intentions. And I think during this whole crisis, you know, the one thing that I've realized with people is that everybody has wanted to help each other out. And that's been an ongoing sort of, topic, really, is that people are keen to help other businesses as much as possible. And particularly in the events industry, it's a much tighter knit community than perhaps other types of agencies. So, you know, in terms of white knights versus vultures, I think most companies that are looking to acquire now, they are looking to save these businesses. I'll refer to Steve again. Obviously, I've been working with Steve for a long time. But we talk about the concept of the safe harbor, don't we, Steve? That's one thing that we talk about quite a lot. And, you know, it is offering these companies that may be in trouble a safe harbor to continue to grow and work in the industry and offer, you know, the talents that they've got. And, you know, in fact, while Steve's on camera, Steve's done 2 acquisitions already during the whole COVID thing. And I think that the companies that he's acquired, that the owners of those businesses will say that Steve is the white knight and is offering a safe harbor. So, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's good. Okay. So like some of the reasons, I mean, there's the reason for, or the roll up, or the just, you know, saving back end money, cutting overheads, expanding the service offering, everything else. But the sort of the roll up thing, but more strategically, you know, part of M&A should be about the long term vision. So it's, you know, if you're thinking about it now, you're a little bit behind the 8 ball, should we say? Because like now it's more about, I would say, a rescue situation or a, you know, or an opportunity situation. But if it's also part of your longer term strategy, and so which was mine, you know, I always wanted to grow an agency of value, and my personal belief was, you know, the money will follow that, the cash will follow that. You know, build a great service, build a great offering. You will make, you know, you will income, you'll win more clients, everything else, and then the creation of the wealth and the value in the business would be created by growing the business and also expanding our offering. So both our offering and our where we work. So the best thing I ever did was go to the US.
Right.
So just interested to talk about, you know, those thoughts and views about, you know, how you expand your offering, how you get more clients, the strategy around why you go after an M&A or, you know,
I think that was on your list, actually. Better try and find it again. But those opportunities around M&A are things like, you know, I discussed it briefly before as well. You know, the opportunity is to acquire a big list of clients all in one go. You know, if you're looking at growing your business organically over the next 3 years versus acquiring something within a 6-month to 12-month window, then, you know, the two don't really equate. Growing an organic client list can take forever, whereas acquiring with a nice list of clients obviously is a very quick thing to do. Obviously, it still presents a bunch of problems. And the other thing, I mean, I'm constantly talking about this as well, and I've seen it with clients who have tried to grow their business by splitting their office in half, and half the business heads to the US, either to New York or LA, and then they find one problem or another with having the 2 offices and trying to run the 2 businesses. And obviously the easiest thing to do really when you're talking about M&A is to look at what opportunities you have in terms of geography. and to make an acquisition that can help you with that. What the other thing that I hear a lot about in the US market is that the US love the creativity of the British. So there's a massive opportunity in terms of business if you can get a footprint in the US, because the Americans love to hire British businesses. And I think
I'm going to stop you there and share something else here, because it absolutely. So I'm going to digress, but one of the other things they love is our accent. There's any Yanks on the line. I think Karen might be there, so I think I saw her pop up earlier. But I remember being at a client event, and they brought all their different agencies together in a room, and it was just to sort of meet each other, this sort of thing, which is great. They broke us down to workshops, and we had all this, and I was sat on a table with some very senior advertising people, and it was then we had 10 minutes to work on something. Who's presenting this? And they shoved it under my nose, and you can present it. This is you know the skill set here much more than I do. No, you present it, because even if it's crap, they'll love your voice. It's bloody hard work getting a business off the ground in the US, and those first 3 or 4 years of pushing that millstone around and building some credibility and this, that, and the other. But once you get it right, it blossoms, because US market is 10, 12 times bigger than the UK market.
Yeah, exactly. And the great thing is there are these businesses, the businesses I just mentioned, the ones that have gone out to the US already. And I'm actually speaking to these types of guys a lot right now. They've gone out to the US, and actually they would love to be acquired by a bigger British business to help them to continue with that push out in the US, because it is so difficult. It's a long way from home, and culturally there's lots of big differences. So, but there are lots of businesses with English guys that have set up in the US, looking to be acquired right now.
Best thing I did was and I met Maureen, who now runs the whole business, through a client. That's the way I did my strategy. I talked to my clients saying that I wanted to make this move. We were looking at doing that. 40-50%, 60% of our income came from US companies coming into the UK and into Europe. So the big ones were MasterCard at the time, and United Technology, which we're doing big air shows for around the world. And they said, we'd love you to be in the US. Yes, we'd use you if you were here, but we're not going to bring you from London to the US to do events unless you're here. So I started that conversation. And then it was a lady called Debbie Brown, who'd been one of my clients at BT. And I reached out to Debbie and a few other people and explained a bit of the strategy that I was looking at. And she put me in touch with Maureen, who she'd worked with on a couple of things. So she'd moved out to America to head up marketing for BT North America. And there we were. And of course, all of that was done on the back of the 9/11. So that's, we took the opportunity of crisis to make that move.
Yeah. And there's going to be a huge opportunity for more of that, I think, at the moment. But like I say, there are businesses out there that are looking to be acquired. So anybody who's on this call, they want to speak to me about those businesses. And there's one more thing, actually, Richard, I just wanted to discuss, because there are obviously, I'm in my mid-40s, you're in your mid-30s, and there's some other older people on the call. And there's some very young agencies that are coming up that, their CEOs are in their mid to late 20s. And they are looking at the way that their agencies are structured in a much different way. And they have been offering experiential, but they're digital natives. And they're building really interesting 360-degree businesses. And the companies that they're building, they own their audience, they own the ability to market, and they own some products. So they built our e-commerce as well. And I think there's a bigger opportunity around this whole sort of crisis situation, where not just events agencies, but any creative agency can build out these different types of assets to build a more robust business. I was reading the other day about a new, we've been talking about unicorns a lot over the last few years, probably since the last recession, and how these have taken over the world, but how, in the last few years, the last 6 months, they've really crashed. So businesses like Uber or WeWork, have started to fail. And what I was reading yesterday is there's a new type of business in town called the camel, and it's interesting. It would be interesting to discuss, particularly with the guys on the call, what they would see as an opportunity to build out an agency model that is much more 360 degree. And like I say, there are younger businesses. So I don't know if anybody on the call is aware of an agency or a business called Jungle Creative, for instance. There's another business in Manchester called Social Chain. And these are agencies that have the ability that own their own talent, and they own their own channels to audiences, and they also are stealing everybody's lunch. You know, these big old agencies that are grinding around. These younger companies, because they're social first, digital first, video first, are managing to win lots of new business right across the board, whether it is event or experiential, I suppose that more so. But they're building out much more broader offerings, so they can survive these type of events much more easily as well, because they have their own e-commerce, their own products, they have their own channels. So I'll be interested to talk to others about that idea as well, and see whether that would be of interest.
Well, I think that's an interesting point that you flagged there as well, and I have now used this a number of times in a number of the webinars that I've been on, of like the event management. I've always sort of for years now banged on about event marketing, not management. Management's a process, it's what we do. Marketing is a reason. But now, literally the last few weeks, I've started to sort of say, well, hang on, let's drop the event thing here. Then let's talk about engagement management. So, even within the EMA, we're now talking, it's all about customer employee engagement. It's our role to do this, whether it's digitally, online, through a comms. And it's about creating that much more integrated communication strategy across clients and their businesses, and not just looking at one channel of that. So I think that, for the big picture, that's where the opportunity for our industry lies. And I think what you're talking there of looking at a number of different service offerings, there's that old adjective of, expanding your service offering to your core customer base and growing your customers. But expanding that is perhaps the way the future, a more robust agency can be created, and then where you take it. So on your horizons or your geographical locations to service your client base.
Yeah, and I think part of that shift really is coming from publishers. So publishers have stopped producing print, they've gone into digital, and they've grown out a number of services for their clients. If you even look at big old businesses like the Daily Mail Group, who have a huge exhibitions business, as well as being able to, sell, sell holidays and sell advertising space, et cetera, et cetera. So the publishers that are coming into the business and are disrupting the agency sector, the creative agencies. And I think there's just more to do for businesses that have started in from the agency side of things. I think there's more to do for these traditional types of agencies to come towards this more robust business model that the publishers perhaps have sort of accelerated towards. Anyway, it's just an interesting point that I've been thinking a lot about, and would like to get people's opinions on that type of thing.
So let's talk briefly about the valuation or valuation models, or how you sort of how would you approach putting deals together? I mean, every deal I know is different, but how would you start to advise people on sort of deals now? Acquiring something with no revenue. So that's the value of that. Management buyouts. I think you talked there about young, and I'm assuming they're acquiring younger businesses, which those guys could then be taking over the business in the future and buying you out of the business. So if you're looking for individual exit strategies, an MBO to me was a very, very good vehicle personally to do it. I know there's the equity or executive buy-ins, so companies that have got cash, they're maybe in another sector, but willing to put money in to see a business grow, or to help change its structure. So some private equity or VC money out there for that. Longer deals, bigger strategies, I know, but thoughts and views on scenarios of how to put some deals together? Or is it literally a deal can be made, you need to sit down and think about it and talk about it on an individual basis?
Yeah, I think, well, let's talk about what a deal would normally look like for an event.
A year ago.
Well, 3 months ago. So in the normal way of valuing a business, I would say, just in very average broad terms, you would take the last 3 years profit, the EBITDA from the last 3 years, you would average that out, you would minus any dividends that the owner had been taking as a salary out of the business, and you would end up with a number that would be then multiplied. And those multiples obviously is the key thing. But let's just say for a business under 10 million, it's likely to be somewhere between 3 and 6 for an events business or an agency of one type or another, with no other IP. So they don't own any, they don't own any buildings or they don't own any platforms or digital platforms or products that's involved. So the valuation would boil down to something like 4 or 5 times their average EBITDA. Right, so say that ended up being 100 grand. 5 times would be 500 grand.
Let me just jump in there though to share that too. So if I'd been reinvesting in my business and growing my business, so I had a very small net profit, but would you be able to sort of put some of those numbers back in to sort of say, okay, well, yeah, you've just opened an office in Asia, so you spent 150,000 on doing that. If you hadn't done that, you would have done this. So because I always used to work as gross profit as a good figure, and I knew that if I timed everything down, I could make 20% net on my.
Yeah, so that whole conversation around that number that needs multiplying is obviously a much bigger one normally. Yeah. So any extraordinary investments that you'd made during those times, they need to be put back in. So like you say, if somebody just opened up an office in Singapore, they paid a big deposit on the rent, and you bought a load of desks and tables and computers, etc., etc. All of those extraordinary things would be put back into your EBITDA for the multiple. So yeah, it's always worth arguing the toss if you're on that side of the fence about what has been spent in terms of reinvesting in the business. But broadly speaking, if there hadn't been anything like that, it just would be a multiple of the net profit.
Okay. And there's different scenarios on type of things. I think one of the things that I'm saying to people, and I had a few phone calls as well of people in the industry just asking for thoughts and advice and everything else, is my big one is, if it feels right, get on with it. Even if it's about just collaborating at this moment, just start working together, get on with it. If your gut feels right, start moving this forward. If your gut's telling you you don't like this, not comfortable, then forget about it, walk away. As long as it's not your ego that, I'm worth this, I'm worth that, or I was, if you're going to start to squabble over that stuff, you'll never get through it. And I put my hand up. I know that, we try to do 2 or 3 acquisitions, which would have been very good when I had that CEO hat on, which would have been very good for the business, but just couldn't get to an agreement on a price. I mean, it was it was an acquisition, but it was a merger. It was all paper transaction, not cash, and to allow people to have an earn out. But they thought they were worth this much, and I said, well, no, you're not. My approach was we have a mirrored valuation process, and we would do exactly the same for us as we do for you, and that's the value of the businesses. It doesn't really matter if it's 6 times EBITDA or 3 times EBITDA. It's we're both businesses are being valued the same. The
issue that I always come across when trying to put deals together is that sellers aren't very realistic at all. I think this is something during this situation. If somebody is in trouble, that they have to have a realistic view of a valuation for their business, because if they don't, what tends to happen is they're made actually quite a decent offer. Like you're saying, you make them a decent offer based on a valuation that's very sensible and sane, but the ego gets in the way. Everybody wants to be a millionaire. This is the number one issue I see, is that people agency owners, they want to walk away from the deal and they want to go to the pub and sit there and say, I just sold my company, I'm a millionaire. You know, that's kind of the bottom line to it. So any sum that works out where you're not taking £1,000,000 home on day one can tend to scupper even, you know, any type of sensible offer. But what happens is after a time, the sellers will realize, and if they've got a long enough runway, that's good. But the sellers will realize that there are no other offers coming from the marketplace, and so that these sensible valuations are decent offers, and they need to be considered. Otherwise, they're never going to sell their companies. But obviously, during this time. And this is something that, again, I talk about with my clients a lot, because we have to start the conversation with a sensible valuation model. But really, there are no sensible valuation models for lots of businesses now, because there isn't a business there to buy in lots of scenarios. So how do we go about valuing an events business who has no real business for the next 12 months? And that becomes much more difficult. And something I was talking about yesterday with a client was how to do this. And I don't think there is a real sensible way to do it. It really has to be based on what that CEO believes he can build as a business during the next 12 to 24 or even longer, 36 months, while a recession is obviously going to happen. Yeah. And that's a much more difficult conversation to have, particularly with a CEO whose ego feels that they should be much richer after these conversations. So
I'm going to open it up to anybody else want to come in with a question or thoughts or any minute now. So if anyone gets ready for that. I did have one thing now. I've just forgotten what I was going to ask. God, I'm getting old. I think the key to doing those deals is being fair. If you're the acquirer, or there's always acquirer, even as you talk about a roll up, and there's always going to be a lead in the conversation. Someone that's potentially more valuable than the other. So, they talk about M&As, but in reality, it's always an acquisition. But if it's a paper acquisition, everything else, then I think the fair stuff is having those conversations about, okay, what the future looks like. And, if you can get your business back to health, or your side of the business, your area, yes, there are options for the future based on the business doing this and that. I think more deals around that in the future.
Yeah, and deals tend to be structured like that anyway. So you won't just have a deal, an offer made where you're given this set amount of money over a 3-year period of an earnout. Quite often, those payments will be linked to some kind of performance metric. So if a business underperforms anyway, you would expect to get less for your business, and if it overperforms, you would expect to get more. Yeah. So those are normally built into businesses, but I think much more this needs to be a focus during this period, if you're to make an offer, that they are subject to a business being able to be righted, and the ship to be righted, because obviously if not, and you're buying a turkey, you need to have some kind of accommodation for that if it fails, because you're buying a whole team as well. It's not just it's not assets actually at all, and so these are service businesses, so it's down to the people being able to pull something off.
I'm thinking more sort of along the lines of a rescue package and stuff like that. And it's like, well, okay, if we leave it, the business is worth zilch because it won't be there in 3 months' time. Or if we come in and rescue, we'll do this, and this, and help you with that. A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. But the value is based on the business recovering through this process, and your equity could be worth this, or this in the acquiring company in the future.
Yeah. Well, and just on that, I think in terms of structuring deals, I think that the best way to structure a deal really is to offer something in the top company as well for the business that you're acquiring. I think it keeps the owners of the businesses interested over a longer period of time. And quite often, there will be some kind of exit anyway for the top company. They will be looking, if they've got private equity money, or they're building a bigger business, like I said, so they can exit with a 10 times multiple rather than a 5 times multiple. To keep those people working in the business nicely, to offer some cash and some paper would be the sensible thing to do, to keep them engaged.
Yeah. Okay, so 10 minutes to roll, guys. Anything from the audience? Does anybody want to chirp in, ask a question, make an observation? Otherwise, we'll just carry on our conversation. Is that you wanting to come in, Steve, or are you scratching?
Yeah, I can say something. Why not? It seems no one else is going to say anything. Just to be clear, Eventful was an acquisition, and that wasn't a distressed business at all. It was a strategic acquisition and agreed pre-COVID, and we completed in COVID. Obviously, there was more pressure on to due diligence. So that was just, and Hannah and the Unicorn team was a strategic hire, going back to your question about growing the business going forward. So they weren't, and we do say we are white knights and harbours in the safe storm, but ultimately you wouldn't want to go work for a vulture anyway. So it doesn't make sense anyway. But so the reality there is, to the point, is that we have made these acquisitions on hires for the next 12 to 24 months. So that is the reason. There's a certain natural selection process going on in the industry anyway, which part of me is just watching. It is a bit of survival. Going back to your question about valuations and acquisitions, and it's a very complex thing, really. I think M&A, you got to look above the M&A heading. What are you doing as a business? What do you need to grow? What do you need to adapt? And that drives who you acquire, talent-wise and business-wise. I fundamentally have a problem with buying distressed businesses because it's for the wrong reasons fundamentally. For two reasons: why are they distressed, and also that's not a natural process to find a business that fits. If they are fitting, great, then I'll be the first commercial person to take advantage of that. And I think it's all part of the new way of working anyway. I think agencies have to look at themselves really. We're really busy, so we're going to survive, and that's not through mergers and acquisitions, and we've been sensible with our cash. So they're the businesses I want to join me, not so much the people who are standing on the cliff who've got nothing to do right now. So I think there's a waiting game to see what happens post furlough, and there's absolutely, we're hiring now for the needs we have now. And going back to your question about the holes and the gaps, it is expanding, filling those places that we've always been doing, but we're now going to have more emphasis on that going forward. So that'd be my point of view.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, and I think it's big opportunities personally to grow a business. The other thing that was quite interesting, I remember I read a Financial Times article, was how you ran the business in your early stage, and we've all done this. Everyone on this call, you gambled everything to set up that business. You did it. You put everything. God, I can remember putting my house up as a loan without telling my wife, and she's probably listening somewhere at one point, because we had a cash flow issue because thanks to United Technology and the air show, mainly because they were doing more than what they planned to do, and they haven't sent us enough money to run it. But you gambled everything, but then you build your balance sheet, you have cash, and you're much more reticent to then take that roll of the dice again and take another. Okay, we're now going to buy this, or we're now going to acquire that, or we're now going to open an office in Timbuktu, because all of a sudden that cash is cash. It's real cash. It's in your bank. It's not the 15 grand you had at the beginning so your sweat equity at the end of the day. So there's those challenges, and I think you need to change your management style, your leadership style, your management style, and your risk willingness to do that, or sort of segment it and say, right, this is my play pot. This is the pot that I am going to gamble with. I am going to try and grow the business, and this is the foundations of this business, which keeps the business alive and going.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Actually, it's the same when you go gambling anywhere. Really, is you need to make sure that you can afford to lose the money. I mean, one thing about M&A anyway is that a lot of them do fail. Even if the deal happens, it can still be very, very difficult to integrate a business. So, yeah, in some ways, you have to be much more careful with that pot of money. And funnily enough, I find that quite a lot, Richard, with some of our clients, is that when you do have that pot of money, quite often I think, great, they've got loads of money to spend, but actually they're much more careful and considered.
That's
and
why you got the money.
Money, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, every time you don't take a dividend out, that's what I say to people within the client's organisation. The minute you don't take money out, you make a strategic decision as the owners of that business to leave that money in, to reinvest that money.
Exactly.
In the business. I think that's really important because that's your money. Caroline, I think you wanted to pop in and say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, obviously, Eventful was recently acquired, as we know, by Arima. But I just wanted to pick up on 2 points. One, Andy mentioned about having realistic expectations of valuation. And I think over the years, we've been approached a handful of times over 18 years. And I think through all of those conversations, what the learnings have really been to really think through what your expectations are of selling, of evaluation. And then also, Richard, your point about finding an investor who's fair. And I think those are the two things that I would say as advice to anybody looking to sell, or to form a partnership. And I think I mentioned to Chetan a couple of weeks ago, if anyone is out there wants to just chat about my experience of selling, obviously without divulging any confidential information, really happy to chat to any fellow founders or company owners.
No, it's a massive emotive situation.
It is, indeed.
You've now folded into a bigger organization. You built your baby up, you nurtured it, you loved it, you tended it, so it's like, all right, now the decisions are, it's great that decisions, part of you is that, great, it's lonely at the top. So those decisions are really difficult. However, they're your decisions and it's easy to take. Now you've got to talk to other people about that. And then on the other side, okay, I exited. Took me a good 12 months to get over the exit.
Wow.
And think about, did I do the right thing? Didn't I do the right things? It's a bit painful at times, but it's an emotion. There's a lot of emotion here. And this is why I think Andy referred to at the beginning is entrepreneurs they're not easy people.
Quite unemployable, I think.
Unemployable, yeah.
Usually quite opinionated.
No, I say that.
All right. Well, I'm going to bring this to a close. And if anybody else wants to jump in, any last comments, everything else. Andy, a big thank you for your advice.
Thank you, Richard.
We all know where Andy is, or Capital A. You can look him up and Google him. I'm also happy to chat with anybody or give some thoughts and direct to anybody in the industry. And very confidentially, if you need to. I love the industry. I love it passionately, and I want to see it come back to life and carry on growing and succeeding. I think there's great opportunities out there for the future. Check back to you.
Thank you.
I want to see that investment grow, please.
Me too.
Did you move from that church yet? That's how we live.
It's stuck to my butt, I tell you. One day we will have a beer.
Yeah,
somewhere.
I can't wait. Seriously.
I'm working on it, as you know. Watch this.
Well, I
space.
mean, just anecdotally, I've got three organisations that have never met physically.
Wow.
We've all interviewed and done everything online virtually. That's there's some good learnings there, well, in a positive way. But we are just starting to plan a sort of social distance get together in a park somewhere. Just starting to plan. Anyway, I had it. Thanks.
Time for a big barbecue soon.
Big barbecue, absolutely. Very long tongs.
Yeah, if you had a barbecue with all of us there, everybody would want their own set of tongues. That's what I'm talking about.
Branded. There's an opportunity. Branded barbecue tongs. Anyway, there you go.
Good stuff, everyone. Thanks for joining. Video will be on, and I'll post the contact details for Andy and Richard as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Andy.
Bye.
Catch up.
Thank you.